It's the good old 70s, and things are heading upwards for the LEGO brand. Oh, you don't know what LEGO is. Okay, then let me start from the real beginning. First brought to fruition by a woodworker from Denmark named Ole Kurt Christensen in 1916, the LEGO brand has been responsible for the creation of a myriad of toys in the play construction genre, and is nowadays most well known for selling sets composed of small, plastic interlocking bricks that make a range of buildings, vehicles, and basically anything else under the sun that you could think of. Spurred by the restriction of materials and income during the Great Depression in the 30s, Christensen would focus his attention on creating wooden miniatures, and from this endeavor, the very first toys of his creation would be made. Stuff like buildings, vehicles, and basically anything else under the sun that you could think of. Pivoting completely to the production of toys, he would officially name the company LEGO, a contraction of the words in the phrase leg godt, or play well in Danish. With a new goal in mind for the company as it grew from the sale of these toys, Ole Kurt Christensen considered expanding his business, and after World War II, the company would acquire its first equipment and materials needed to produce toys with plastic rather than wood, thus speeding up the manufacturing process and opening up new possibilities for their toys. Inspired by a similar product of the time, an intriguing type of construction block being sold by another company going by the name of pcrf, the beginnings of LEGO as we know them would start to find their footing in the 40s. pcrf's blocks, or self-locking building bricks as they called them, were somewhat simple blocks except for the small yet quintessential detail that they were hollow, with studs on the top to fasten any number of bricks together, rather than the classic wooden brick playstyle of setting them on top of one another and hoping against all hope that they wouldn't come crashing down. Christensen would adopt elements of these bricks, investigating other patents held by pcrf, later leading to the creation of the earliest LEGO bricks in the 50s. From here on out, things go pretty standardly, with the LEGO being first sold in surrounding Nordic countries, and from what I can tell, these early sets were kind of just boxes of the bricks, without any real instructions on what to make with them, with the proper LEGO system set being released between 1955 and 56 to much better reception. Following complaints about the difficulty in keeping the bricks locked tightly enough together, LEGO would introduce an invaluable detail to its bricks, adding a set of hollow tubes where the bricks were empty on the underside, nestled between where the studs on top would be. The tubes allowed any brick being attached underneath to connect more snugly to the one on top, and the hollow nature would allow them to be pulled apart more easily when the time came. Now from here, the company is truly in an impressive growth period, seeing much success with their LEGO sets, all of which were being sold under that LEGO system name at this time. Some highlights of the 60s and 70s include the beginning of their being sold in North America in 1961, the switch to more hardy plastics for the bricks in 1964, the opening of Legoland in Billund, Denmark in 1968, the first and most iconic redesign of the LEGO logo in 1973, and the creation of the first LEGO minifigures in 1978. A task that is much easier said than done, coming after a long effort to create human figures that would remain in scale with the rest of a given set. An aspect of almost all LEGO sets that the company would rely on for years, for the most part, treating the scale between various LEGO parts and the minifigures as an unspoken hallowed law of making LEGO sets. I'll talk about this again later. I want to just say now that LEGO from these years is relatively simple, with extremely brick-like appearances in its final set pieces and only very few interactive elements. While these LEGO sets can be furnished with wheels, gears, and other mechanical parts, a lot of them lack the sleek appearance that modern rounded LEGO bricks have. But this doesn't mean that the sets were completely devoid of any odd-shaped bricks. They were just a lot less common, and mostly reduced to simple slopes for aesthetic effect. Most of the sets would be city-oriented or some kind of vehicle that would be used within it, but there were also some medieval-type sets and even space sets leading into the 80s. These would be later referred to as themes, or general design guidelines for a series of sets. For example, in the castle theme, you might see 4 or 5 different sets, each being used to create a different castle or other medieval setting. So, like I said before, it's the 70s, and things are heading upwards for the LEGO company. Besides an agreement with Shell to include their logo on sets where it can be implemented, most frequently in city sets, there's a pretty distinct lack of any true licensed themes, like what we're so accustomed to nowadays. By licensed theme, what I'm referring to are themes of LEGO sets that build something from a movie or a TV show or whatever, like LEGO Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings, or what I'll be using to segue into my point, LEGO Star Wars, which was the very first licensed LEGO theme, first hitting the shelves in 1999. There's a specific vibe to these early sets from the 90s that I fear will never again be replicated. They're kind of right in the middle of being both too simple and too overthought, which will become an issue I cover in more depth down the line. In the 90s, mainly because of Star Wars vehicles using some odd shapes, and because of more focus on sci-fi and technical elements in other original LEGO themes, we started to see some weird looking bricks, if you can even call some of them that. These pieces kind of only serve the singular purpose that their set calls on them for. Like, for example, some windshields and motors like what you're seeing on screen, these pieces would really only have a use for these specific vehicles, at least if you're a kid. It may be hard to implement such an odd-shaped piece into a normal building of your own making, something that LEGO kind of prided itself on. The fact that you didn't necessarily have to use the pieces to make exactly what was on the box. With the introduction of licensed themes, the selling point or the whole reason they were interesting or exciting to buy was the fact that you'd be getting an easy-to-build replica of something exact from Star Wars. A concept that wasn't good nor bad for sales, but would end up becoming a crutch either way. All good things must come to an end, or at the very least, a near end. When LEGO began to sell Star Wars sets in the late 90s, they also started to use this theme and the subsequent money it would rake in to experiment with original themes, which is what this video aims to discuss. However, for now, because Star Wars is only popular for the time that a Star Wars movie is out, or in the public eye for one reason or another, Star Wars LEGO sets would see a spike in sales around these times, and then quickly dwindle afterwards. Okay, so then what are you to do? The somewhat obvious answer, at least to LEGO, was to obtain other licenses as an anchor, while simultaneously attempting to launch an original theme that would attract as much income as a licensed theme for a longer time, a period of time more under LEGO's personal control. This would lead to a complete oversaturation of quick-to-die original LEGO themes, most of them strange and scary, but others kind of cool in a way, even if they are both strange and scary. The very first year that LEGO began to see a genuine decline was 1992, and it can be pinpointed both because of an obvious drop in revenue and the firing of multiple original designers on the LEGO team. In their stead would come about 24 or so new ones who reportedly didn't have as much knowledge specific to the creation of LEGO sets. Already off to a bad start, the whole spiel I just went on about LEGO's over-reliance on licenses would begin to take hold. And on top of that, the inexperienced new designers would lose sight of the whole point of LEGO sets. And also, like I mentioned before, rely too heavily on pre-built parts that weren't very versatile for reuse. What I mean by this is that not only is there a lack of sets where you have the freedom to build what you'd like, you're basically also being given these weird parts that you can't do much with on top of that, even in non-licensed sets. The sets would start to be designed with the play being put more in the forefront, with the building aspect of them being treated as a chore that would be preferable to avoid altogether if possible. More play features would be implemented, but it also meant that there would be fewer pieces, less attention to detail with the actual building, and just to kick LEGO fans while they were down, the brand would axe one of its most popular lines, the pirate theme, in 1997. Truly a very dark time to be a LEGO liker. While things were pretty bleak, they weren't all bad, and some interesting developments came to be in this time, such as the launch of the relatively successful Bionicle line in 2001, and the first skin-colored minifigures being made in 2003. In 2004, the worst year of LEGO's decline, they would be hit with a loss of around 269 pounds, which would be about $338 million US today. Briefly mentioned before, the Bionicle line would be part of LEGO's saving grace in these years, or at least a precursor to the true brand-saving original line. What set Bionicle apart from other LEGO themes was the fact that the sets were accompanied by a few tie-in movies based on the very prevalent story guiding Bionicle. Unlike many failed themes having come and gone within these years, Bionicle was given a genuine story, more in the vein of the licensed sets that were selling so well for whatever period of time. LEGO's thought process was kind of like, what if we could present the allure and storytelling of a licensed set, but manufacture all of that ourselves? Why continue to rely on stories that people have already told, when it could be a viable option to tell our own story and create sets based around that? Long story short, that's what they did, with the help of multiple books, comics, and most importantly, TV movies based on the Bionicle theme. While this did prove to be a huge step in the right direction, the somewhat of a hesitance to put so much faith in something with more longevity, something like a long-running TV show, wasn't a risk that LEGO was willing to take without any smaller shots at a proof of concept. Into the late 2000s, LEGO would become only slightly less experimental, and decide to release only a few more original themes and branch out into weird things like board games, which did actually work for a while with sales, causing them to begin to recuperate slightly, of course with the help from more licensed sets. But all the while, LEGO was developing the ace under their sleeve, something that spent so many years in production to get right, something I've covered in fair depth here on the channel, this golden child being none other than the LEGO Ninjago theme. If you're really interested in the whole story, I do recommend watching that video, but to make a long and rich story short, in 2011, LEGO released a new theme, to be assisted by the airing of a TV show based on it. This TV show would kind of be the main draw, explaining the story of the theme and its characters, which would convince viewers to buy the LEGO sets that went along with it. To say that this worked would be an extreme understatement. LEGO Ninjago, as it may kind of sound like, is based on a group of ninjas, and most usually follows them combating some kind of higher evil, with the early story reading extremely similarly to that of Star Wars for comparison. After what has now been more than 10 years of the theme being around, it's still going. It has gone through quite the rocky journey and what I would call a beautiful metamorphosis into its own powerhouse, even separate from the LEGO sets. I love Ninjago a lot, and there's a very good chance I will be talking about it again in the future. For now, what you need to know is that Ninjago made more money in 1 year than what any of the brand's previous original themes did. And so, because of the success of Ninjago, LEGO has been doing quite good in the last 10 or so years, but the relatively short success story I told you here today is not the only thing I made the video to explain. Like I was talking about before, during the 90s and 2000s, LEGO had to do some pretty weird things with their themes to attempt to find something that would stick, and these themes were more miss than hit. This is a video I've been wanting to make for a long time, and I've made draft after draft after draft trying to figure out how I'd like to structure it, because to have just put them in a list format I think would have taken away from the sense of timing and placement of these sets. I think knowing the situation LEGO is in will help you to better understand why these themes were made, what they were kind of after in their creation, and what made them all such failures. I will still attempt to be chronological about them. Part of LEGO's attempt to broaden their horizons and make more money in especially trying times was to appeal to part of their audience that they feared they weren't quite getting to, this audience being girls. LEGO honestly wasn't ever only promoted towards boys, but they were enjoyed by a primarily male audience. I would even argue that it's kind of the same way today, of course not intentionally or by design. That being said, this disparity is something that LEGO has tried to remedy over and over again with some fairly mixed results. One of these attempts was LEGO Belleville, a theme from 1994 made specifically with girls in mind. Some of the draws of the theme included glittery and translucent bricks in a pink color palette, a reliance on larger molded pieces, and more doll-like figures of things like fairies, princesses, and horses. For the most part, Belleville wasn't all that bad of a theme, and actually lasted pretty long, only being formally discontinued in 2009. The only reason it's really on this list is because of how strange it is, and how much I think it goes against the philosophy of LEGO that building the thing is half the fun. Starting with the obvious, the dolls were only somewhat LEGO-like, less like a minifigure and more like a Playmobil figure, with multiple points of articulation, most notably at their knees, elbows, ankles, and wrists. The only thing that made them LEGO was the fact that their feet could attach to the studs of the bricks. Another thing about the Belleville sets, and something you'll find common about the themes on this list, is that many of the buildings and furniture and things like that would come as a single molded piece, with not that many bricks to actually build anything with. It was pretty possible that the only thing you'd be building used at most 30 bricks. Some of the sets that had bigger built parts actually look pretty nice, but even by these standards, having so few bricks is an extreme downside in my opinion, because I personally always thought building was more fun than playing with the thing afterwards anyway. Belleville as a concept has never truly died because, like I said, LEGO has been trying to appeal more to girls in various ways. I'd like to think the whole reason why LEGO Friends and the mini dolls that the theme uses came into existence is because of the early framework that Belleville's dolls set in place. In a similar vein, LEGO Scala also set out to accomplish some of the things that Belleville did, but I opted to talk about its second incarnation because I think that LEGO was using it as more of a desperate sales tactic in its second run than the first. LEGO Scala more or less took the doll aspect of Belleville and turned it up to 100. First releasing sets in 1997, Scala did not include any LEGO bricks and instead relied on fully molded plastic furniture and accessories. You'd get some kind of house and furniture along with a Scala doll, which also looked much less LEGO-like, being functionally similar to a Belleville doll with the added characteristic of having non-molded brushable hair. The only parts of the sets that would ever be somewhat reminiscent of LEGO would be the floors of any buildings, their studs allowing furniture to be attached to them directly. Some sets would also come with minor buildable elements and would include additional bricks to do that. The weirdest part about these Scala sets, however, is that the shape of the studs were molded into flowers, rather than the traditional round shape. This made it pretty much impossible for most normal LEGO pieces to be used with Scala sets, because most LEGO bricks didn't have enough space to clip onto the flowers. And nowadays, that would kind of be the most frowned upon design element that a LEGO set could use, because part of the draw of LEGO in the first place is that you can build whatever you want with them. Like, nothing is stopping you from getting 3 $200 sets and using the parts to make one $600 mega build out of them. If you bought a regular LEGO set and a Scala set, you might not be able to do that. I think that the aesthetic of the overall theme is quite nice, and like I said, is reminiscent of Belleville, but also employs the use of some other bright colors, which I enjoy. I would like to get something from this theme one of these days, because even if it was weird and kind of a flop, I liked the way it looked. LEGO Scala was discontinued only a short while after this iteration began, being officially cancelled in 2001. This next theme is one that's actually incredibly important to the overall story of LEGO, despite its failures. It serves as what I would call the early blueprints for Bionicle, something that's made all the more clear by setting two of the products, one from each line, side by side. Maybe a less knowledgeable LEGO fan would tell you that these two are from the same theme, which cannot be further from true. This one here is a Throwbot, the theme that has earned its spot here on this list for one reason or another. One I'll talk about in a minute here. Starting in 1999 as a spin-off or appendage of the overall Technic theme, which focused on using more slick mechanical looking pieces, the Throwbot line and its sets were already a far stretch from traditional Technic ones. These sets, instead of using various gears and bars to make some kind of cool mechanical contraption like a car or a plane, were meant to make a Transformer-esque robot, using pieces that only somewhat resembled Technic pieces. These pieces were much brighter, thicker, and had a special flexible part included in each set that stood as the gimmick, or whatever you want to call it, for the theme, since most LEGO themes have them. Each Throwbot would come with these little plastic discs that, when placed into the flexible mandible-like claws of the robots, could be flung from its grasp, and now you understand why they're called Throwbots. Each Throwbot kinda had a vibe to them, both in their color palette and in the little faces that they would come with, because most of the sets, if not all, would come with these weird looking little printed faces to act as the face of your Throwbot. Many of the Throwbots would have a designated theming to their name and coloration. For example, the red and black fiery looking Throwbot was named Torch, and the white and blue model was named Ski, and it even looked like it was on a pair of skis. Some models would take that extra step into theming, with the model named Jet having propellers on its shoulders, giving it the appearance that it was able to fly, and the model Turbo being set on wheels, hence the speed-related name. Another odd detail about these sets was the way they were packaged. Instead of being sold in boxes, these sets came in little plastic containers that could be reused to carry your Throwbot to and fro, which I think is neat. It kind of encourages you to take your robot and fight it against your friends, that kind of thing. I would like to make a separate video about this line one day, or if not, just go into more depth when I talk about Bionicle, because I think that the evolution of this general idea into something stronger is incredibly interesting. Despite how cool I think these things are in retrospect, Throwbots was unfortunately a weak theme in the late 90s, and only lasted about another year before it was officially cancelled in 2000. I think that during the 90s and 2000s, a good way to explain what LEGO was doing was as a bunch of in-between steps. Kind of doing these half ideas before inching closer to something successful. First hitting the shelves in 2001, Jack Stone is definitely one of these half ideas. As much as I think Throwbots was a half idea, or like a quarter idea in the path to Bionicle. In Jack Stone's case, I think that this theme was more or less his half step to the last entry on the list, whenever I end up getting to that. Something that had always been a fairly popular theme throughout LEGO's history was the quite simple and pretty self-explanatory LEGO City theme, encompassing everything you might find in a city, with skyscrapers and homes, public service vehicles, rivers for a man to fall into, and business/commerce related buildings and shops. But like it is often purported by the stories in those pesky third-party licenses, every city needs a true hero, and the designated hero of LEGO City was set to be Jack Stone, an aptly named jack of all trades who would take up many important duties within the city, such as being a fireman, a pilot, and a general threat to criminals within the city, and otherwise making a positive impact on the safety of the city as a whole. All of this seems like a fairly normal theme to take on. I totally get the idea of attempting to retroactively add a storyline to one of the more popular LEGO themes, but the way they did it was honestly restrictive, strange, and altogether seemed like it lacked the thought and care that it may have benefited from. See, Jack Stone was marketed to a much younger audience than what the general LEGO City theme was. The first, although lesser offense of these sets was that they came with far fewer pre-molded pieces than what is normally expected for a LEGO set. An issue that I mentioned had a wide reach across multiple sets and even entire themes, Jack Stone being a good example of this. The bigger problem in my eyes was the fact that not only were the human figures in these sets just pre-built, more in the fashion of Playmobil, but they were also much so out of scale with traditional LEGO minifigures. That was another big problem that plagued most of the themes on this list. The almost intentional feeling decision to derive from what I called the hallowed law of scale between the parts created by LEGO. It was of a pretty much wild importance before the early 90s to keep every element of a LEGO set in scale with one another, between the bricks, the figures, and even the end product. With things like Scala and Jack Stone, It kind of just felt like whatever designers were on board at the time were just willingly throwing this consideration into the wind, which really sucks, but also produced enough cursed things for me to giggle at, so maybe it's not that bad after all. It would have sucked to live through this though. The figures that came with Jack Stone sets were probably around 1.5 times the size of the normal minifigure, and if that wasn't weird enough, they looked like a strange amalgamation between a minifigure and a human, having yellow skin and claw hands, the same restrictions in the hip, arm, and leg joints, but having more detailed faces, noses included. Overall strange and frankly kind of pointless and suffering from lukewarm marketing, it's kind of no surprise to me that Jack Stone was a failure. With LEGO City sets, as is evident from the iconic commercials, you, as the player, are supposed to feel like the hero of LEGO City. To put a face to that act of selflessness, on top of already severely reducing the potential audience by making the theme more child-oriented, it kind of removes some of the personality from LEGO City and makes it more about the character, one who really didn't come across as having one himself. It was kind of like, what can I get from Jack Stone that I can't get from another similar brand, like a G.I. Joe or even something more in LEGO's competition like Playmobil. It was even worse about this theme that they made that decision to make it incompatible with other sets. Another big mistake that I think could have made a difference to how well it sold, if you could have been able to use Jack Stone with normal, more expansive, and detailed LEGO City sets. Jack Stone was understandably cancelled in 2003, but it did get a direct-to-VHS short film made about it, and let's just make this a little bet. If this video gets 1,000 views, I'll watch the movie and make a review video about it. Last but certainly not least of LEGO's misfires, LEGO Galador was a theme that suffered from pretty much everything that makes a theme a failure. This is another one that I think is such a hot, steaming pile of mystery goop that it absolutely must have a video of its own, but I will try to be as thorough as I need to be this time around. Galador was kind of a hybrid of two ideas I mentioned previously, taking elements from Throwbots, Scala, and Jack Stone. The worst element from Jack Stone, that being the out-of-whack figures, the worst part of Belleville, the appearance of the figures being more of a doll than a Lego, and the worst part of Throwbots, a so out-of-this-worldly strange approach to its design. While yes, it does come across as more of a doll or an action figure, it still has some articulation restrictions in the nature of LEGO figures, and somewhat claw-like hands. But wouldn't it make you even angrier if I told you that this is pretty much all there was to Galador? Not a single LEGO brick included in any of the Galador sets. The entire draw of the theme was these figures themselves. The only thing LEGO about them was the fact that they could be taken apart and have their pieces switched around. So, like, you could buy a figure and then get supplemental packs with accessories to outfit it, like what's seen here. The funniest thing about this whole theme is that this character's last name is Bluetooth. This man is named Nick Bluetooth. You can't get any more Luke Skywalker than that. Kind of getting ahead of themselves, LEGO tried to emulate what they were doing with Bionicle by giving this theme a live-action TV show to go along with it, to make some more sales or whatever. Something that the design team at the time literally stated on what I have come to believe is the official Galador website about the line was that they thought action figures and this concept as a whole would be more marketable than simple bricks, because it took the creative fun of LEGO and melded it with action figures and a fun, non-violent action-adventure TV show with Nick Bluetooth to accompany it. The characters in the sets would range from human characters to more alien-like ones, with multiple of them taking on Bionicle-esque appearances, with Bionicle clearly serving as a main inspiration for the theme. LEGO spent so much money on the marketing for this line, for the licensing and broadcasting of the TV show, only for it to prove to be the company's worst-selling product of all time. Unsurprisingly, taking the blame for being the cinder block that pulled LEGO down into the lake of bankruptcy in 2003. The theme was bad, the story was lackluster, and the figures themselves were not only ugly, but made of a generally unpleasant rubber-like material rather than the traditional plastic. Overall, Galador sucks, and a lot of LEGO fans are hesitant to call it a LEGO product at all, and I don't blame them at all. By 2003, as you may have guessed, Galador was pulled from the shelves, and a similar pre-built action figure concept thankfully hasn't been visited by the company since. So that's about it. I had a lot of fun finally being able to talk about this time in LEGO's history, and I can't wait until I have an opportunity to talk more about it in the future. Let me know if you have any suggestions for equally strange or weak LEGO products, and I might make a follow-up to this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.